Hey, what's up, everybody? Isaac here, Civil Engineering Academy. Excited to be with you on another podcast episode. Today, I'm excited to bring on a special guest, Zach Harris, who has a fascinating story about passing his FE exam. It's quite a journey for him, but just a quick background. He got his bachelor's degree back in 2006 from Clemson. Later went to school in Chicago, Lutheran School of Theology in Chicago, had an opportunity to do that, and really has spent quite some time working in the ministries and helping other people that way. He learned a ton of skills, and then he has found himself back into the world of civil engineering and having to pass his FE exam after being out of school for quite some time. So it's a fascinating story to hear his journey into how he was able to overcome the challenges of getting back into study mode and pass his FE exam. He ended up finding our course at civilengineeringacademy.com to help him on this journey, but he shares a ton of tips, a ton of tools. If you're finding yourself struggling to pass the FE exam or you've been out of school forever, Zach's going to have some tips for you. So I don't want to spoil all the beans on this one, but it's a fascinating interview. Like I said, you're going to really enjoy this one. So it's going to be coming up with Zach in just a minute right after this. All right, Zach, we're rocking and rolling. Thanks for joining me today on the Civil Engineering Academy podcast. I appreciate you doing this.
Thanks for having me. I've been a listener, excited to be on the other side of the podcast wall.
I love it. Well, I always love to start these things. You've got a fascinating background in what you do and where you're at. So I'd love to know, how you found yourself into this world of civil engineering and maybe touch upon your past and where you're at today. How did you get
It was a long, meandering story. So I grew up in North Carolina, and my grandfather was an engineer. He was electrical, and my dad worked in a lumber yard. And so that was kind of the background. And I ended up studying civil engineering in college. And parts of that went really well, and other parts didn't. In particular, I had an internship that wasn't fun at all. Just a negative experience. And it was mostly, I think, in retrospect, looking back, because that was almost 20 years ago now, just a people fit thing, right? I worked, I was hired. Co-oping was really big where I went to school. And so it was a lot of pressure to co-op. It felt like the thing you had to do. So I got whatever I could get, and I got this co-op position. I got hired before my supervisor, and then I was sharing a cubicle with my supervisor in the basement of a converted textile mill in the middle of nowhere in Georgia. And it was just not fun. We weren't a good fit together. At the same time, I was involved in the Lutheran campus ministry as a student at my university, and there were some family connections there. The campus pastor and my mom were good friends in high school, and he was seen as this real, highly accomplished guy to come out of my small part of North Carolina. And so a combination of knowing I didn't want to go work in converted textile mills in the basement with people I didn't enjoy, but not necessarily knowing what other kind of options there were. There was a real clear, I enjoy this thing. Someone who in my family and community of support as someone who's really respected does it. And so, and it offered me a chance to go do a big crazy thing, because I got to move to Chicago to go to seminary for 4 years, where the story for us, for Lutherans at least, seminary is a 4-year deal. And the story I tell is I failed the writing test. You had to submit a writing sample to prove you could do the work in English, aimed more at international students, but it was a reflection essay. And the part of civil engineering to that point that I'd really enjoyed was school. I liked school. I'm that kind of a nerd, right? And they give you a grade at the end, and you can win at school, like at school, And so that always appealed to me. But no one in my studies had ever asked me what I think about something, really. It had always been about figuring out solving a problem, proving a point. They're well, clearly they don't care what I think. I mean, I don't know anything, right? And it didn't go well. And so I ended up in essentially kind of an English as a second language for graduate studies for a semester, which was very humbling as a native English speaker. But then the arc on that I humbly brag about is I was in a class at the end, and I ended up having an op-ed published in the Washington Post 4 years later. So it took a while. I learned how to read. And then we have, as a Lutheran pastor, we have a initial draft. It's like the NBA draft, except it's not televised, and the signing bonuses aren't quite as large.
Mm.
And so I got up for adventure. I got assigned. I got drafted. They don't actually like when you use the word draft. I was assigned to Southwestern California. I thought I was moving to Los Angeles. I was so excited. And then it was Bakersfield, California, which is different than Los Angeles. But it's its own charms, has its own charms. And pretty soon after that, I was really interested in getting back to campus ministry stuff, and ended up in Boulder, where for 12 years I served as the pastor of Lutheran campus ministry at the University of Colorado, which was a lot of fun. It's like being a real pastor. I mean, technically, I'm still a real pastor. I still have all the power that comes with that. But also, in my situation, I wasn't the pastor of like a congregation with like little old ladies and stuff. But also kind of ran a small nonprofit because we had a board of directors, had to do, gift development. We had to grow the endowment, grant writing, all that kind of stuff, which is stuff that I, as far as positions go, for me, it was a nice fit because I really liked that. I still had the thing that I always told people after seminary, because I always would get the question, right? Oh, how did you end up in seminary and stuff? But the gift of it, I think, was that through an undergraduate engineering education, I developed a problem-solving kind of side of my brain. And then humorously, I learned to read and write. But like I developed some other skills, right? And I always found I've enjoyed having both of those kinds of sides of my brains and to be able to use them both. And so the executive director kind of part of things could scratch that itch for a while. And in helpful ways.
Was it hard? I mean, what was the transition going from California to Colorado? Is that just a hand raise, a submittal that you wanted to move there, or what was that?
We get assigned the first time, and then we at the time had a more of kind of a hybrid system. So you're not like a complete free agent, but like a church like the Roman Catholics, and some United Methodists you get placed somewhere. No one has to go anywhere they don't want to go after the first time. But you have to apply for jobs through a local bishop who then decides to put your name forward or not forward.
Okay.
So you work within this system, add a lot of experience and interest in campus ministry stuff. So work those connections to get.
That's awesome. Well, Zach, why don't you tell us a little bit about this timeline? Because, I mean, you graduated as a civil engineer. I'm not sure what year that was, but then you jumped into the ministry side. How long were you doing that? And when you were in school, did you have to pass your FBE while you were in school, or was it something you didn't have to do and you would do later? Or what was the timeline on things there?
So I graduated with my civil engineering degree in 2006. Which somehow appears to be like 18 years ago. Did 4 years of seminary education stuff. I was a pastor of a church in Bakersfield for a year, so there's 5, and then 12 years in Boulder. The FE was not required for graduation, and at the time, it was pre-computers. Hadn't been invented yet in 2006. As I recall.
No CBT exams.
Yeah, no computer-based testing. It was the TI-89 was as complicated as computers could get. They offered it on campus like once a semester, I guess it was. And the time that everybody on campus that it was offered was on a Saturday during a football game. And I was pretty committed to going to football games. And I knew that I was going to seminary at that point. And so I said a lot of things that I regret to my classmates. At the time, I I told we're making a poor choice and going to sit inside of a classroom all day while I was at the football game. In retrospect, we lost the football game. It was uncompetitive. Had a bad time at the football game. And then over the past 9 months, I still text. For years, I've got like a little text group with the guys that I was really close to in civil engineering. And they've heard me complain for the past 9 months about how I should not have gone to that football game and just bitten the bullet on this with them however many years, 18 years ago.
That's hilarious. Well, geez. Well, so doing the ministry thing, though, sounds like it's taught you a ton of people skills.
Yeah.
Which is kind of opposite of the engineering world, where we graduate, people are very technical, and they go, work in a cubicle per se and crunch numbers or design things and have to learn people's skills later on. So it's fascinating to me that it's almost, went through school, but you almost did this opposite a little bit. Like you've learned all the people skills, and now what are you doing? What are you doing for work?
Yeah, I'm roadway design EIT. It's been there was a big learning curve. I've learned a lot of technical stuff. A lot of the work, is drafting stuff, and CAD stuff is very different than it was 18 years ago. I think we had one drafting class in AutoCAD that I was very uninterested in, and may or may not have been particularly taught with a lot of passion. So there, I'm working on plans for roads and stuff, which I find really exciting. A place where they sound pretty like disparate, right? Unconnected.
A little bit. Like, I'm serious. Like, what was the switch? How come we went back?
Well, I in turn don't think they're that disparate. Don't think they're that far apart. I found plenty of ways to kind of connect them. I used to do a thing. I've always liked maps. Maps is a thing I like. And I had a whole kind of dog and pony show that I would do with local churches and our student group called The Theology of Maps. Yeah. And I was the kid, my grandfather, the electrical engineer, he had a big, like one of those old conversion vans with the tube TV in the back. And so the best vacations were you take us down to South Florida, and but mostly it was the thrill of being able to watch TV in the van on the way down there. But I insisted, we stop at all the rest areas and get the maps so that I could follow along with where we're at, and learned. There was some YouTube video recently that came across my algorithm that was like the secrets of the interstate highway system, and it was all stuff like mile markers, countdown and stuff. And I'm like, I learned this when doesn't everybody learn this when they're 7 in a van, right? Like what are other kids doing? But that there is, right? Like, actually, I could do a whole thing on maps. There's something really important about maps, right? Like, so one of the many things, right? If you find what I like about them, former Czech president and poet Václav Havel has this great quote about how a medieval peasant boy has a better understanding of the universe than we do, because that peasant boy has a better understanding of the limits, the horizon of his knowledge, is what Havel says, right? So, we, in these days when we don't rely on the visitor center paper maps, right? You just plug it into the GPS, then I can go anywhere, right? I'll never be lost. That's not quite true, right? Like if you follow a map long enough, it will always take you to a place that you've never been before, right? And so with my theology hat on, what is sacred about maps is that, I get drawn into them, and it takes me to the place where the known and the unknown intersect. And that's a definition of something sacred or holy, right? It's where the confusing becomes familiar and the familiar becomes strange. It's where the known and unknown intersect. And so I would do that with students, to do that about like the communities we lived in, right? Like to create, I'd have us create these maps of like where are the places you actually go in our community, and highlight, right? Like why don't we go to the north side of Boulder? Right? Like what do you think is there, right? Because maps have information on them now that's factual and stuff, right? But we don't have maps anymore that say, here be dragons. We like to pretend we know, we claim all knowledge for ourselves. But, so I'd always do that with folks, right? And there's a real way in which I get to, like, I'm creating maps of the future every day is a really romantic way to look at it, right? And developing plans of what this road's going to look like, right? Like, is there going to be a bike lane here, right? What is the buffer going to look like? Which is, I'm not sure that all the work needs to be super profound and solely judged on its like ultimate meaning, but I think there are real places that it connects.
That's neat. Well, I want to go back a little bit. We talked about your FE, and curious, what was that journey like to pass? I know we ran across each other as you're getting into resources and such. I'm curious what helped you there, but also how difficult was that exam after being out of school for so long, and what tips would you share with people that are in the same boat as you?
Yeah, I decided maybe a little under a year ago, that was going to be a thing I needed to do, and started to find problems and stuff, because there was a part of me that was like, I could just figure it out, like they give you the book, like it can't be that hard. And so I had a couple weeks of hubris of like, if I just spend a couple weeks like sitting with, like, oh, can't be that hard. And then I learned some more humility pretty quickly, where I was like, it's almost like a driving, like, do I need to ask for directions? No, I can find it. It's fine, so I had to stop and start looking for some resources that would help me find my way through it. And there are a lot of them out there, and my wife's a librarian, so she's trained me well on how to do research. And so I researched my options and came across the Civil Engineering Academy, and which had great reviews, and lots of the courses have great reviews. But the value for money was just with where I was at was great, and that proved to be true throughout my time. It worked for me. It again, there's a part of my brain that really enjoys winning school and taking, like, I was always good at tests, right? So like that part of my brain was fueling the hubris, right? Like there's a non-realistic part of my brain, I now know, but it's still there, that thinks like, oh, just give me a test and like I can probably pass it. It doesn't matter what it's on, right? Like I can, because it's a game, right? It's a puzzle to solve, right? Like that is. That's not true in this case. It took the time. I worked all the way through it. I moved across the country. I'm in North Carolina now, so I had to sell a house and start a new career and buy a new house and all those sorts of things. And easy for it to not to be the first thing you're doing, and easy not to do it like, when you get home at night.
Yeah.
But having to be disciplined to set up time for it. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy, I don't think. A lot came back pretty quick, but, it's just that breadth of like, the most frustrating feeling I would have repeatedly was just like, how would I know this, right? Like, I forget what I was working through. It was probably environmental, so I've got some post-traumatic stress there anyway. And there was just like the solution had some like exception for sulfates or something, right? And I'm like, this isn't going to be like, how would I, and that's the deal, you're not going to be able to answer all of them, or I was not going to be able to like know everything, which wasn't necessarily like a comfortable place for me to be in my preparation, because that was a part of it too, I think, right?
Yeah.
Like, I wonder trying to time, like, when do I know, when am I prepared, right? Like, how much more do I need to do, knowing that I'm not going to know everything?
So what, I guess that begs the question, how many hours did you put into it being out of school for so long? Or even what would you recommend, like months, or what would you recommend?
I did over 9 months with a move across the country and several real estate transactions. I think if I had stayed in one place and stuff, 6 months probably would have been been good.
Okay.
It wasn't in terms of sheer numbers of like preparation. I don't think it wasn't necessarily like a linear progression of like preparation, but that I needed to like do all the sessions about like, oh God, steel design or whatever, like that I hated back then, and I needed to like
Again.
remember again, right? That's that people asked how the preparation how it was going. I was always like, turns out I like differential equations the same as I did in college. Just not much. But then it was like at the end, once I set an actual date and set up like, oh, I'm going to do a practice exam this day and that day and work through this and like really do the intensive stuff at the end, that's when it really, I felt like, started to develop the skill of, because it's not about in the end, it didn't really feel like it was knowledge necessarily as much as it was developing like really reacquiring and honing in that like problem solving like mindset of like, oh, I don't know the answer. Like I don't immediately know the answer to this. Don't freak out. Right. Which would be a normal reaction, or not normal. I don't know. My 40-year-old reaction. Try to avoid that, but then get into like, what can I quickly like figure out like what's going on here. Right. And like, and it felt like that, reflecting on the test, that felt like the skill that was being tested more than, yeah, you need to know all these things. And like, there were plenty of questions that my knowledge helped me on. Right. But developing that skill is what felt important in the end.
So you're advising someone that's 39, 40, and is going to take the FE again, been out of school forever. What advice would you give to them?
You got to put in the work. I think it's doable, most of all, right? Like that was probably the hardest part too, right? Are the days of like, I'd spend 4 or 5 hours on steel design and not necessarily feel like I'd like that to be linear input and output, right? Like, oh, well, now I've got it figured out, right? Like, well, no, I probably need to spend next weekend on it too. And having had in my mind as you're like checking off the modules and stuff, right? Like, well, I should take it in like late October would be great for it, and then either life happens or, I spent 3 weeks on structural stuff. That was real frustrating and it didn't feel like I was making progress on it. Right.
Yeah.
But to be able to like, have a hope or expectation that like it can happen still. Yeah.
Well, it's true. I find the attitude is also just a huge component to this. If you're going in thinking you already hate it, or maybe you hate the NCES, or you've already felt this thing, you haven't even started. Going in with the right attitude can make a huge difference in preparation too. So, I'm just curious, but what are some parts of the course that you liked or that helped you the most as you're going full?
The video solutions, for sure were the best part. I mean, you need other parts. You need a problem to have a solution too, obviously, right? But the to be able to have the video solution where I've got the problem, I've got a solution, the PDF of the solution, and it's not like there's a step in the solution that I don't understand the rationale for. To be able to have the video solution was really helpful. Because that was actually the other hardest part, I think, was that if I had gone like prepared for it and taken it when I was in college, is I had a circle of people that I prepared for all of our tests for together, right? And they could explain things to me, right? Yeah. In this case, it was more of me by myself, and if I don't have without a resource, if I don't know the solution, then I don't really have. It's not like the old days. I can't just turn and ask.
Yeah, true. Whoever. So I'm curious, in your experience, what was the test taking experience like when you had to go take it on a computer, versus back in the day? Things weren't all computerized. So what was that experience like? Was it bad? Was it not bad?
It wasn't too bad. I've watched the videos about like what it's going to be like and stuff. It did feel a little Mission Impossible-y with the hand scans and the like security protocol things. So understandable.
Well, check.
It once I got in it I think by the time I had in my preparation getting into it, once it started, it's really long, but it can feel real short too. Right. And so,
and in the course, we try to give you a nice exposure to that environment. We give you a CBT exam experience. So hopefully that paves the way a little bit for you.
Yeah. And there's always, it's so long. There's so like, delirious. Like I remember there was a question, what does GIS stand for? Real simple, right? Like, even as an undergrad, I loved GIS. I always thought it was so neat. But it was it was like, I don't know, 4.5 hours in. And all of a sudden I'm questioning like reality, like what does GIS stand for? Right? I know what it is. Like it's geographic information systems, right? No, it couldn't be. That's maybe, you're just like, I don't know what's real anymore.
Yeah. Your brain gets fried after so many hours of answering stuff like that.
The last question was essentially, I don't know what it was. I remember it being just the volume of like a cylinder. And it just nearly made my brain explode because I was like, no way, this can just like be what's the volume of this like barrel. Like what? Like there has to be an angle in here.
Oh man. Well, speaking of surprises on this exam, was there anything that caught you off guard, or did you feel pretty well prepared?
I felt really well prepared. Nothing was completely out of that I didn't expect was going to be there,
What did you do to celebrate when you passed?
Well, I'm headed back to Colorado this weekend, so I'll call that celebration. The skiing here in the Southern Appalachians has not been as
good.
Not as good as I'm quite used to. So we'll do that.
Awesome. Well, what's next on the horizon? Speaking of maps and plotting your future, PE is part of that?
PE is part of that. My kind of approach in making the big switch here was, I want to get into a new field with potential and options, and a part of that I understand is, you got to get immersed in it and figure it out and stuff, right? So that's kind of my professional approach right now, is to immerse myself in what I'm doing now to try to learn as much as I can. PE is a part of that in this particular field. So an eye towards that, but mostly right now an eye towards, learning as much as I can and then seeing where things go from there.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations on passing FE. A lot of people have said that FE is harder than the PE. So
that's what I've told myself
for so long. That's amazing. So
yeah, thank you for all the help.
Yeah, we're happy we can be a part of that journey, and we hope that we continually improve that and make it a good resource for people if they're struggling to pass this, or if it's your first time. That's always there. If anyone's interested in that, go check out our website, civilengineeringacademy.com. You'll go find it there. And we're revamping our PE stuff to match the new specs as well. So a ton of work there. But this has been fun, Zach. Thank you for doing this with us. Your journey is fascinating. I got a lot more questions I would love to ask you. Got to be respectful of the time we have. So is there any last second tips you would share with anyone else? Or, I'm also, I guess one of the questions I really have on my mind is, now that you are practicing civil engineering, has there been likes or dislikes as you've jumped into it? And maybe there's some tips there for people that are listening to this as they're starting their career.
Yeah, I mentioned it before we started recording. moving from running a small nonprofit with very limited resources, trying to accomplish big goals, to a fairly entry-level position in a much larger organization, in terms of has been a nice reset for sure. In terms of I've supervised like people, like I've had employees, and lots of them right out of college and stuff, and so it's been interesting. And my spouse has heard me comment upon the work of folks right out of college that have worked for me, that have mostly, loved, but it's a big transition. Like I think in any field, right? Like to go from an academic environment to a professional environment, like, you don't get grades at the end of the week, which is both good and bad. Like sometimes it'd be nice to get that clear feedback all the time. Right. And the work you're doing, the thing I always found was that with that new folks right out of college would try to get like an A+ on everything I asked them to do. And sometimes I just needed them to do things, Yeah. Like actually this is more important that we accomplish this than get it right over the next month, So not having as much pressure, not having as many people depend on you, has been helpful in getting like immersed in this freed up my time and energy to really get into things and learn and be curious about stuff. And it's just comfort, right? Like you got to be a reminder of how important any kind of growth requires being uncomfortable.
Right.
Like, so, the whole environment is different, right? Like I have to track hours, and they expect me to show up on time and go home at the end of the day, which is part that I love, right? Because I was essentially my own boss, right? Which meant I could work whenever I wanted, which sounds great. But then you just work you're not highly efficient because you can do it or not do it unless there's a hard deadline, right? And so much of the stuff ministry stuff is really longitudinal, right? Really long-term games that you're playing. I do enjoy that, I did something at work today. There were no plans, and now there's some plans. I have achieved things. But then you work all the time. So that's helpful. But to try to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, I think is really important.
Well, awesome. Thank you again for jumping on and sharing your journey with us. I think it's pretty inspiring, and I think a lot of people that will listen to this will feel that. So thanks for doing this with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, Zach, we'll talk to you later. Bye.